Hey gang! Using the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, will get you 10% off any order over $10 at Flipside Gaming. It'll also get you 10% off any orders of singles at Multizone. And it'll get you 10% off most products at Original Magic Art, with the exceptions of some paintings. If these fine sites don't have what you're looking for, you can also consider using my affiliate link when ordering from TCG Player. And if you'd like to join the Generic Goblin Gang to support this channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description below. Hey gang, and welcome back to another Gamebreakers game. And this week we have Nick playing his Pharika deck, keeping a Forest, Grim Backwoods, Deathrite Shaman, Kadama's Reach, Wayward Swordtooth, Curse of Disturbance, and Eternal Witness. Chris is back playing Sidisi, keeping Dig Through Time, Scalding Tarn, Phantasmal Image, Fleshbag Marauder, Dryad Arbor, Underground Sea, and a Forest. Ben has joined us with his Syr Konrad, keeping 2 Swamps, Cryptbreaker, Endless Atlas, Vengeful Dead, Runescarred Demon, and Elbrus. Eric is playing Thrun, keeping 3 Forests, Izuri's Predation, Seedborn Muse, Kenrith Transformation, and Incubation Druid. Ben wins the die roll and starts us off. Ben plays a Swamp and casts Cryptbreaker. Chris plays a Scalding Tarn and passes to Nick. Nick plays a Forest and casts Deathrite Shaman. Eric plays a Forest. Ben plays a Swamp and casts his Endless Atlas. Chris draws and plays Underground Sea. He sacrifices the Tarn to go and find a tropical island, losing 1 from the fetch, and taps 2 mana for Survival of the Fittest. Nick plays a Grim Backwoods and taps his Deathrite Shaman to exile Chris's Tarn from the mana. This gives Nick enough mana to cast Kadama's Reach, and he goes to find a basic for the field and 1 for his hand. Eric plays a Buried Ruin and casts Incubation Druid. Ben plays a Rogue's Passage and passes. Chris plays a Tectonic Edge and taps 3 for a Fleshbag Marauder. With the sacrifice trigger on the stack, Ben activates his Cryptbreaker while the rest of the table sacrifices a creature to save some time. This has Ben discard Elbrus to make a zombie token, which he sacrifices instead, and Chris then passes. Nick plays a Wayward Swordtooth and then plays out 2 basics. Eric plays Castle Garenbrig and casts Cultivate. He passes as he goes to find a basics. Ben draws and plays Attrition, passing. Chris plays a Cavern of Souls, naming Shaman as it enters. And he then taps all of his mana to cast Sidisi, who comes in and mills his top 3. He hits 1 creature in that, which makes him a zombie token with Sidisi, and he passes to Nick. Nick plays a Forest and casts Tendershoot Dryad. He passes, making a token on Eric's upkeep. Eric casts his commander in his main phase, Thrun the Last Troll, and passes. Ben plays a Swamp, and Nick puts out another token once he finds it. Ben then activates the Atlas, drawing a card because he controls 3 swamps. Chris activates his Survival after drawing for turn, discarding Dryad Arbor to go and find a creature, and Nick puts out the token he gained on Chris's upkeep. Eric finds Gilded Drake, putting it to hand after shuffling his library. He then casts it, swapping the Drake for the Tendershoot as it comes in. He swings Sidisi at Ben, which has Chris milling himself for 3 again with Sidisi's on-attack trigger. He hits 1 creature in the 3, making another zombie token with Sidisi's ability. Ben responds before moving to blocks, activating the Cryptbreaker to discard a card and make a zombie token. He then just decides to take the hit. Nick is a bit jealous as Chris gains a Sapling token on his upkeep, and he draws for turn. He casts Curse of Disturbance on Eric, and then plays out Pharika. Nick then moves to combat, and swings the Drake at Chris. This gives Nick a zombie token from his curse, and then Chris takes 3. With nothing else, Nick passes. Eric draws, and Chris gets a Sapling token. Eric then casts Rancor in his main phase and puts it onto his commander, and then turns his commander to swing at Chris. This gives Eric and Nick a zombie token, and Chris blocks with 2 Sapling tokens who are 3/3s currently because of City's Blessing and the Tendershoot being out. This forces Eric to pay the 2 to regenerate Thrun before damage is dealt, but he does take out the 2 Saprolings at least, and Eric then passes. Ben plays a Swamp and casts Vengeful Dead. he goes to combat, swinging his zombie token at Eric. This triggers Nick's curse, gaining Nick and Ben a zombie token. Eric then declares he'll block with a newly made sapling token from Ben's upkeep, and before moving to damage, Ben sacrifices the attacking zombie to attrition. He destroys the Tendershoot Dryad. With the Vengeful Dead seeing a fellow zombie get put back into the grave, it deals 1 to all of Ben's opponents, and he then passes through his phases to pass to Chris. Chris draws, and realizes a lot of the lands he wishes he had in his hand had been milled by Sidisi. He casts a Sylvan Ranger, going to find a basic and putting it to hand. He plays it for turn, and Chris then casts a Sakura Tribe Elder before passing turn. Nick draws, and in his main phase drops Massacre Girl. This will effectively wipe the board, and before she resolves, Chris sacrifices his Sakura Tribe Elder to go and find a basic and put it to field. Massacre Girl then enters and does what she does best, and the table counts up the number of zombies dying, and the total is 9, which has Ben's Vengeful Dead dealing 9 to each of his opponents, and Nick then passes. Eric reactivates his Castle Garenbrig, and is able to then recast Thrun before passing to Ben. Ben plays a Swamp and casts his commander as well, Syr Konrad, before passing turn. Chris pays 3 mana in his main phase, 1 of each color, for a Sultai Charm to take out Syr Konrad, and he passes turn. Nick plays Eidolon of Blossoms in his main phase, drawing from it entering for its own constellation trigger. He exiles his own Wayward Swordtooth from the graveyard to Pharika's ability, making a snake token. It's also an enchantment in addition to being a creature, and Nick draws from the Eidolon seeing it enter. Moving to combat, Massacre Girl goes at Chris, making Nick a zombie token before she connects. Eric plays a Forest, and puts Rancor back onto Thrun. He swings his commander at Nick, who blocks with the snake and the zombie. The snake has Death Touch, which forces Eric to regenerate Thrun, and Nick only takes 3 trample damage from the commander. In his second main phase, Eric then plays out Seedborn Muse, and passes. Ben plays a Swamp and taps out for Godpharaoh's Gift. He moves to combat, exiling the Vengeful Dead to the Godpharaoh Gift's trigger, which has it come in as a 4/4 copy of itself. He swings it at Chris, making Nick and himself a zombie token, and Chris takes the hit. At the end of turn, Chris decides to discard Phantasmal Image to the Survival, and goes to find a creature in his library. He reveals Acidic Slime, putting it to hand before starting his turn. Chris draws and casts the recently revealed Slime, which comes in and destroys the Godpharaoh's Gift. He then passes turn. Nick plays a tap Blooming Marsh as his land for turn, and he casts a Farhaven Elf, going to find a basic swamp for the field and putting it to the field tapped. He then swings Massacre Girl at Chris once more, and he gets a zombie from his curse, and Chris takes the hit because Massacre Girl has Menace. Eric draws and plays a Forest. He counts up his mana and casts Azuri's Predation. This has him then counting up the creatures on the field, and Eric makes that many beast tokens, who then each fight a creature apiece. 4 zombies die to this, which has the Vengeful Dead token dealing 4 to all of Ben's opponents. Some of Eric's tokens also die, but he still ends up with a healthy 5. Moving to combat, Eric then goes at Ben with a Seedborn and Thrun, and he then passes, untapping with Ben once the combat step is over. Ben draws, and activates his Endless Atlas in his main phase, drawing another card. He then plays out Sewer Nemesis, and he picks Chris as it enters. Chris plays a tap Creeping Tar Pit, and recasts Sidisi. He mills 1 from the Sewer Nemesis because he cast a spell, and then 3 more from Sidisi entering the battlefield, hitting at least 1 creature, and making a zombie token. He then passes to Nick. Nick draws, and plays out Temple Bell before passing turn. Eric draws for turn, and casts Kenrith Transformation on the Sewer Nemesis, drawing a card from it while it transforms into a deer. Eric then plays out Vigor, and moves to combat. He goes at Nick with 3 of the beast tokens, and swings Thrun and 2 of the remaining beast tokens at Ben. Ben blocks one of the 4 4s, and before damage is dealt, sacrifices it to attrition to take out Vigor. Nick takes the full hit from his beasts, and Ben takes 10 from the unblocked beast and Eric's commander. Eric then plays an Eternal Witness, realizing that Vigor should be shuffled in. He does so, and returns to his hand the copy of Kenrith's Transformation. Eric untaps with Ben, and Ben draws. He looks for an answer to Eric, and Nick kindly taps the Temple Bell to help draw Ben a card deeper, and maybe find an answer. Unable to, Ben then resorts to casting Runescarred Demon, and goes to tutor for a card from his library. He finds and plays a Temple of the False God, passing to Chris. Chris draws and plays Oracle of Moldiah, revealing and playing a Wastelands off the top. He then reveals a Craterhoof Behemoth and passes turn. At the end of turn, Nick exiles 2 of his own creatures from his graveyard with Pharika to make 2 enchantment snake tokens. Nick draws and taps a Temple Bell, drawing another card for the table. He casts Deadly Tempest, which wipes the board, but Eric regenerates Thrun. Tempest also deals damage though, with Ben losing 1, Chris losing 3, Nick losing 2, and Eric losing 7. Nick then plays out Fleshbag Marauder to get rid of that pesky Thrun, and Eric puts Rancor back to his hand as his commander goes to the command zone. Eric draws for turn, and activates his castle to make 6 green, and taps enough extra to recast Thrun. He then puts Rancor back on, and casts Lightning Greaves. The Greaves go onto Thrun, and he swings his commander at Ben for 6 more commander damage. Ben casts an Unstable Obelisk, and then uses it and the rest of his mana for Sheoldred. He tells Eric he'd like to see Thrun try and regenerate through sacrifice, and passes turn. At the end of turn, Chris delves away a good chunk of his graveyard to help cast Dig Through Time. Chris casts Life from the Loam in his main phase, returning some lands to his hand, which at this point is only Dryad Arbor. He plays it, and passes. Nick draws, and has the table draw as he taps a Temple Bell. He casts Vraska, Swarm's Eminence, and downticks her, making a 1/1 assassin token before passing to Eric. Eric untaps, and has to sacrifice a creature on his upkeep, losing Thrun once more and putting Rancor back to his hand. He plays a forest, and has Sheoldred become a deer by casting a Kenrith's transformation onto her. Eric then plays out Jiraga Treespeaker and puts the Greaves onto it. He then drops Loxodon Warhammer and passes. Ben plays a swamp and taps enough to recast Syr Konrad. He then plays Geralf's Messenger, who comes in tapped, and has Eric lose 2 life. Heading to combat, the Sheoldeer heads at Eric for 3. Eric then takes the hit, and Ben passes. Chris discards a card with Survival of the Fittest, which triggers Ben's Syr Konrad. This has Syr Konrad dealing 1 to all of Ben's opponents, and Chris then goes to find a creature card to put to hand. He reveals Reclamation Sage, and moves to his turn. Chris untaps and draws for turn, and he casts Reclamation Sage in his main phase, and he targets the Attrition with the Enter the Battlefield trigger. With the ability on the stack, Ben activates it, sacrificing the Messenger to destroy the now green Sheoldred, and with both creatures dying, he gets to deal 2 to his opponents with Syr Konrad. The Messenger then comes out of the graveyard thanks to its own Undying ability, which triggers Syr Konrad again and deals 1 damage to all of Ben's opponents. And then it enters, and Ben has its Enter the Battlefield trigger have Eric lose 2 life. Attrition is then destroyed, and Chris passes. At the end of turn, Nick exiles more of his own creatures to Pharika to make more snakes, and Chris is thankful that Syr Konrad only triggers on things leaving Ben's graveyard, and not Ben's opponents. Nick plays a Blighted Woodlands, and has the table draw again with Temple Bell. He plays out a Creekwood Legion as main phase, and swings his now 3/3 Death Touch snakes at Ben. Ben blocks 1 with Syr Konrad, which has Syr Konrad seeing 1 snake dying, and in turn deals 1 to each of Ben's opponents. Nick then downticks Vraska again to make another assassin token, and he passes turn. Eric draws and plays a forest. He recasts Thrun, and puts the Loxodon Warhammer onto his commander, and then the Greaves. He swings his commander at Chris, gaining a zombie token for Nick and himself. Chris is in a hard spot because he needs to block or he'll die, and he flashes Invencer. The wizard enters, and he targets the Warhammer with the bounce trigger. Eric responds once he gets priority, casting a Heroic Intervention to disrupt Chris's plan, but Chris has another answer with Cyclonic Rift, not overloaded, to bounce the hammer back before the heroic resolves. He then double blocks, and Eric sadly forgets that his commander is actually indestructible, putting him back to the command zone. Moving to his second main phase, Eric then puts the Greaves onto his zombie token and passes to Ben. Ben draws and plays out a Plague Wind, destroying all creatures he doesn't control. He then pays 2 for an Armillary Sphere and passes turn. Chris draws and plays a Polluted Delta, which is dangerous for him to have on the field. He cracks it, losing 1 precious life to go and find a land that hopefully won't hurt him, and he grabs a Bayou. He then plays a Sower of Temptation, stealing away Ben's Messenger. And then an Arbor Elf, and then Llanowar Elves. At the end of turn, Nick makes a snake token with Pharika. Nick draws, and then draws the table a card with his Temple Bell. He casts Wolfcaller's Howl, which honestly until this video I didn't know existed. He then passes turn. Eric draws, and makes 6 mana with his castle to cast Yeheva. He moves to equip her with the Greaves, and then plays out Rishkar, putting the +1/+1 counters onto Rishkar himself. He then moves the Greaves over to Rishkar, and recasts the Warhammer to equip it to Yeva. He then puts Rancor into Yeva, and then moves the Greaves back over. Heading to combat, Eric swings Yeva at Ben, taking him out and gaining 9 life. He then passes to Chris. Chris draws and gives Ben back his messenger. He drops Craterhoof Behemoth in his main phase, who upon entering, pumps his board by +4/+4 and trample. He goes to combat, swinging the Arbor Elf, the Hoof, and the Sower at Eric, and the Llanowar Elves at Nick. Before moving to damage, Nick uses Beast Within to take out the Llanowar Elves, while the rest of the creatures connect with Eric, taking him out, and Chris then passes. Nick asks if Chris has 4 more cards, which he does, and he gains a wolf token from the Howl on his upkeep. He draws for turn, and plays a Bloodgift Demon. Nick then heads to combat, swinging Pharika at Chris, who blocks the new beast token, and Nick then passes turn. Chris draws and casts Deadeye Navigator, who enters and soul bonds to the Craterhoof Behemoth. He flickers it with the Deadeye, once more pumping his board by +4/+4 and trample. Chris then untaps the forest with an Arbor Elves and flickers the hoof again. He moves to combat, swinging the 10/10 Sower of Temptation and the Craterhoof at Nick, who's ready with an Arachnogenesis to follow the combat step and gains 2 spider tokens. Knowing he's dead to the swingback, Chris extends his hand to Nick to congratulate him on a game well played. Game review time. I don't really have much to say about this game other than it was a great one to watch, and I think the players had a lot of fun with it. The only little mistake that I saw was Eric unfortunately losing his commander even though it had Indestructible, and even then I don't think it would have changed very much, but beyond that, I can't say anything else went wrong. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.